Fans, we are live with another edition of the Cheap Heat Productions Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. And tonight we have a very interesting guest, an ECW original, here to discuss his varied career in professional wrestling and many of the ECW folks that he worked with or knew, and many, many other stories. His name is Kareem Horton, also known as the Madman. But before we get to Kareem, I'd like to introduce, as always, Mr. Cheap Heat over in Ireland and soon-to-be public servant, Maurice.
Thanks very much, Jack. I'd like to thank Kareem for coming on the show today and looking forward to talking business with him. So I suppose we'll start off with the boring question then, Kareem, is like, how did you decide you wanted to get into the wrestling business?
So growing up, as a kid, obviously that's the normal start of anybody who wants to be a professional wrestler, watching it on TV. Grandparents, lived with my grandparents. My grandfather used to take me to the what is now the Wells Fargo Center, but it used to be the old, it used to be an old Spectrum. There was a building there prior to the Wells Fargo Center, where WWF at the time used to come, and my grandfather used to take me to the live events. And it was kind of like our bonding time, me and him, and we would watch, go to the live shows and also watch them on pay-per-views. Used to also go to the old Civic Center here in Philadelphia, where old NWA and WCW used to perform as well.
So was there a moment, Kareem, when you decided, you know what, I'm going to pursue pro wrestling as a career? Do you remember that?
A funny thing was, I've been watching it for years, and as I got older, I started going to the other live events, and when I found out about, it wasn't until, I believe my last year or year and a half of high school, when a group of friends, we would all sit around the table during lunch, and that's what all we would talk about is wrestling. Back then you had WWF, WCW, and ECW. And I didn't find out until about ECW until later on that throughout my school year, and only because it came on an odd channel here in Philadelphia. It came on channel 48, and I said, "What's channel 48? I've never heard of 48." So one night I stayed up at the time it used to come on around 1-2 o'clock in the morning, and I stayed up and I happened to catch an episode, and I said, "Oh my God, these people are crazy." And at that point, WWF and WCW just fell off. At that point in my mind, that was it. There was no more. ECW was where I was watching. And as I got older, going through, me and my friends, we used to go to the old ECW shows here that cycled around here, even at the old bingo hall in South Philly. When they came into the county where I'm currently living now, different areas in the county where they got banned over the years. We used to go to these shows, and I looked at my friend. We were sitting front row, and I said, "Let's do it." And he says, "Do what?" I said, "Let's join ECW." He said, "Yeah, you crazy." And I said, "No, let's do it. We can be a tag team." And he just looked at me and said, "Oh, you're crazy. I'm not doing this. You're not going to do it." And I stayed after one show, and I asked the ring crew. I said, "How do you get in? How do you become a wrestler?" And they told me to.
Oh. Okay, we've got the mute problem now. Kareem, we can't hear you.
I think you have to log back in and out because of the phone.
I don't think he can.
Okay.
He's still talking. Maybe he can't hear us, can he?
I don't think so. Let me just
Oh.
take him to the studio and have him come back in.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
when
he's
good.
a nice guy.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting story. I want to pick that up when he comes back about having staying at a show and then actually making the connections after the show. That's not something that.
Oh,
Sorry,
I'm
man.
back.
Sorry,
I'm
man.
sorry.
Yeah, we're back.
I think somebody called your phone, did they? That normally kind of will knock it off.
Oh, okay.
You were just saying that you stayed for a show and then stayed after, and then we lost you.
Yeah, we stayed after, and I asked the ring crew as far as how do you get in, and he told me to watch the TV. They'll advertise the school and what have you. So I watched it one night, and I saw the advertisement. And I called. I didn't know who I was talking to at the time, and I told him I was interested. And I wanted to come, and at that time I was around I'm going to say about 350, 360 as far as weight. And at that, like I said, at that time, my grandmother had just passed away. So I came into some money. And I took that money and I drove up to took the train up to New York. ECW's House of Hardcore was on Long Island, Deer Park, in an industrial park there. And I remember catching Amtrak up to Madison Square Garden and then catching the Long Island Railroad over to Deer Park, New York to go to school twice a week. So when I got in there, obviously starstruck, I saw Taz and Perry Saturn. They were the main trainers there at the school. And, obviously me being the biggest one in the class at that time, because in that class we had Chris Chetty, Danny Doring, Roadkill. There was a couple of others, but it was a big class at the time. And as the weeks went by, I was noticing the class got smaller and smaller and smaller. And, there was guys there chiseled out of rock, in far better shape than I was, and they had some sports background and all that stuff. And I survived. I survived the hardcore training that they pushed me through. And I remember Perry pulled me off to the office and, told me what they really thought of me when I walked in. They thought I was just a fat piece of shit, as he says, that was going to come in here and just fail and not do anything. But you proved me wrong. And ever since then, yeah. And I didn't tell nobody I was doing this. Family didn't know. No one knew. I just was doing it. And it wasn't until I got my wrestling boots. They came in the mail, and I just got home from training that day. And Taz calls me and says, "Hey, are you available this weekend?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I want you to shave your head." And I said, "Huh?" He said, "Shave your head." So I was like, "Okay, I'll play around with it and see." I've never shaved my head. I never went bald. So I sat in the mirror and I'm looking around, putting my hand over my head to see what I would look like bald. And I was like, So I shaved my head, and I had razor bumps for days. And he said, "I need you to come down to the arena." And I said, "Okay." So at that time I was living with my mother, because like I said, my grandmother had passed, and I'm running out the door with a suitcase like I was leaving town. I'm just running out the door and didn't say nothing. And my mom was like, "Where are you going with this suitcase?" I said, "By the way, Mom, I'm a professional wrestler. Gotta go." Jumped in my car and sped down to the arena. And unfortunately, that was the night. It was a televised show. It was the night I broke my leg. So
before we get into that,
the phone calls that was given out that night to my parents and my family, not knowing what the hell was going on, just knew I was in the hospital, and yeah.
But before we get into that, Kareem, we've heard a lot or some information about what the House of Hardcore training consisted under Taz. Can you speak on that just a little bit and what each of the individuals there did?
So the house training under the House of Hardcore was it was grueling. They put you through every aspect of any type of calisthenics known to man as far as cardio. You know, and each week or every other day, the cardio numbers, the times that we had to do these things went up higher and higher. And I mean, from push-ups to sit-ups to crab walks around the ring to running the ropes, you know, 3-4 minutes at a time, back and forth, jumping over people, and doing the stair climbs. It was, and like I said, at that time, me being 350 pounds and didn't have no physical, no sports background, no nothing. I'm just doing this. I mean, there was a point in my head where I'm sitting there like, what am I doing? This is crazy. I came here to wrestle. But over the time as it came, you know, now it's in my head. It's like when I train students now, it's like, this is what you need to do. It's not just wrestling. You have to be in cardio shape. And that's what they put you in. They put you through the ringer to the point where you was done. That train ride home, I was asleep. So yeah, it was crazy.
Did they talk about you know, did you ever get a point where they sat you down and talked about psychology or character development or any of that stuff, or was that on the fly, so to speak?
Character development, they talked about it a little bit. Perry more so. As far as my character, I was more so on the fly. They were gearing me towards the next Abdul the Butcher, the newer generation of Abdul the Butcher. So that's why they had me shave my head. I was supposed to come in as, if I remember right, they had me coming in as Shane Douglas's bodyguard at one point. That was supposed to be, we were supposed to shoot a vignette, and that vignette never happened. Everything just happened so quick. And that night, when I broke my leg, you know, we were out and came out to the ring. Francine pulled me out. It was Shane Douglas and Raven. They were all out in the ring. And Anthony, Pitbull Anthony. And Francine came back, dragged me out of the curtain. I came out. Again, I was just kind of in starstruck moment as I was walking down that aisle, because I was like, oh my God, I'm actually doing this. Yeah. So the character development, like I said, that was kind of like on the fly at that point.
Was that then, Kareem, the night you had that terrible injury? Was that actually your first appearance then for ECW?
Yeah. That was my first appearance. I mean, I was there behind the scenes, behind stage for a majority of the shows, but that was my first televised actual appearance. And yeah, it was a memorable experience. So yeah, I don't know if you watched any of the video. I know you can see when the ropes rolled, when I went to push off, I'm kind of waving at Shane. I'm like, you know, you need to roll him back in some, because I'm not going to be able to get out there. He had Anthony placed out a little too far, and he just was telling me to come on. And when I went to jump off, the rope rolled and I lost my footing. And that's when I tried to catch myself, which I should have just whatever, but wound up snapping my leg, both fib.
He, in a couple of interviews, spoke of the fact that, you know, you in class and what he observed, saw you hit that all the time.
Yeah.
Were the ropes loose, or was it some other factor that contributed to that?
So the ropes there were different from the ropes where you referred to Perry when he mentioned that.
It was actually Shane Douglas who
Or
said
Shane. Okay.
you hit it lots of times.
Because I know Shane Perry also mentioned it as well. But yeah, the ropes at the school was different. They were a lot more tighter and everything. That whole ring, I got used to that ring. When we got to the ECW ring in the arena, which was a completely different ring, it was a lot harder, a lot stiffer. And the ropes wasn't the same as the ropes there. I think the ropes at the school were more just the wire. This one here had it was the cable, and then it had other stuff over top of the cable, and then it was taped over top, and they were a lot thicker. So they were able to roll around a little bit, once you step on there, if you didn't have the right footing.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about then, obviously, the injury happens. You got to break the news to the parents and got to tell everyone what had happened. What was kind of life like, we'll say, in the hospital, trying to explain this to people of you wanted to go down this road? What was the kind of reaction from friends and family?
So friends and family, friends were more excited and crazy, calling me crazy because they didn't think I was going to go through with it. But the other friends that knew me knew, okay, he's not all there in the head. He's going to go to this crazy place and get beat all over the place with barbed wire and everything else. So the friends and them, they were all excited. They're running around telling everybody, oh my God, he's a professional wrestler. And he actually did it. Family, it's more so since my grandmother wasn't around. It was more so my mom and my aunts. My aunt, she kind of supports it even still to this day. She'll support it from afar. She doesn't like the fact that there's a lot of times I'll be in so much pain that I'll be walking around and she'll just shake her head, and then but my mom, because she got to come to some of the shows and got to hang out in the back in the locker room and party with some of these guys, and my mom loved it because that's my mom's lifestyle. So she I mean, even still to this day, even because it was his birthday, I kind of was thinking about New Jack, and he always used to, when he used to come to my house, he always used to ask me, how's your mom doing? How's your mom doing? And but yeah, family, there was really no issue. I mean, even still to this day, they're still running around. Oh my God! And then my little cousins now. Oh, he's a professional wrestler. He's telling everybody in school they want to bring me to, parent and teacher meetings. They want to bring me and not their mom and dad. So yeah.
In the wind up to that story, then, and we'll close it off now, and we'll talk about other things. But what was the response like from the ECW end? Obviously, you had a very, very bad injury, and did they ever invite you back to TV or offer you any roles there in the company?
So that night in the hospital, after the show and everything, Perry calls me. He was the first one to call me in the hospital and said, you came in and you did it right. He's like, when you come back, he's like, we're going to teach you how to do moonsaults. I was like, oh yeah, have me break my neck next time I come back. I said, I will be back. I'm not done. I said, because if you could have saw some of the doctors' faces, they're looking at me and I'm yelling and screaming at them. I said, am I done? Am I done? They said, no, you'll be done. You're only out for about 6 months. I said, okay, that's all I need to know. So Perry was the first one to call, and then Taz actually never called. But we all know where that happened. But Heyman called and told me, you don't worry about it. Your tuition's paid for the rest of the school year. When you're ready to come back, just come back, and we'll start it all over again. And I said, okay. I said, I'll be back definitely in 6 months. I said, trust me, I'll be back. And Bay Ragney, Chubby Dudley, who was there at the time, he's also been a very close friend of mine, and he was one that actually, because my car sat down at the ECW arena for, a week while I was in the hospital or laid up. He was the one that actually drove my car home to me to get it out of the parking lot. Other than that, it was a fun time. And when the cast came off and I did go back, they tried to baby me a little bit because obviously, oh, don't, his leg. I was like, my leg's fine. Let's go. I'm ready to go. And I think it wasn't until like 3 or 4 months, I had a couple dark matches. Then I started thinking, because my girlfriend at the time said, what's going to happen if you get injured again? You need something else to fall back on. And I kind of was like, this is what I'm doing, wrestling. But it was eating at me. And I was like, okay, yeah, what am I going to do after if something else does happen? And so I talked to Perry and I talked to Taz. I said, look, I need to go back to college. I want to finish my last 2 years of schooling, and then I'll come back. And I said, nothing against you guys. I said, but this is something that I think I need to do just so I have something else to fall back on after I leave here. And they respected me for that. And I did my last 2 years of college, and when I came back, or was going to come back, Vince had brought out the WWE at that time. So it was like starting all over from the beginning again, trying to get back in. Yep.
You mentioned that Paul Heyman gave you a call in the hospital and took care of some financial expenses. Did you have any other interactions with him prior to the injury or thereafter?
Prior to, obviously, backstage, the introduction, Taz and Perry finally introducing me to him, and he was a good guy to me. Obviously there are stories, but as far as me at that time, because I was still green and didn't have any real issues or nothing going on at that time. Had I stayed longer, maybe issues would have occurred. But other than that, my interactions with him, has always been good. Even when I met him, when I ran into him, it was about 3 years ago. He remembered me, and he was still, good to me. He even asked me how my leg was. I said, my leg's fine.
Wow.
But I'll actually probably see him again WrestleMania week, since I'll be backstage during WrestleMania here in Philly.
Awesome.
Okay. People always talk about that, ECW locker room, and people from the outside think it was a crazy environment. People that we've talked from the inside say it was pretty easy going and everyone was kind of a close-knit family. What's your experiences been in that environment?
It's a close-knit family. Once you were in, you were in. Obviously there was some guys there, that had their egos was bigger than they were, and those guys I kind of tried to stay away from as much. I showed my respect, but a lot of those guys I stayed away from. But as far as the old Travelodge, the partying and all that stuff, it was fun times down there. I've only done it twice because I live so close. I'd rather stayed home. I went home, but most of the couple times that I did do at the Travelodge, the old Travelodge there, there was some craziness going on. At the time, a couple of rooms was destroyed. I'm surprised they didn't just, stop the guys from coming there, period. But it was what it was.
Yeah, I think eventually they did ban the ECW folks from the Travelodge. You mentioned you were good friends with New Jack, and in fact teamed with him on a number of occasions. Could you describe your relationship with Mr. Young and your experience working with him in the ring?
New Jack was like a brother to me. When I first, he knew I was training at the House of Hardcore, and I used to work in the mall here, not too far from here, and he used to live in the area, and he used to come in the mall all the time, and he would stop by my job every time he was there to see me and would talk. And over the years, we built a bond. Whenever he would be in town, he would call me if he needed a ride, if he needed to go somewhere, whatever. And Jack is Jack. I have nothing bad to say about him, but and I tell everybody he's not as bad as everybody perceives him to be. But once you get on his bad side, yeah, you might as well watch out, because it's like you got crosshairs on you right now at this point. And when he tells you to leave him alone, walk away. That's all I got to say. And and I've watched firsthand, somebody just didn't walk away, and whenever he reacts, he expects the other people around him to react. So at that point, I mean, I knew the person. I didn't want to react, but I also didn't want, to piss off Jack. So here I'm reacting with Jack. So, yeah. To this day, I almost shed a little tear of ministry, because, like I said, I miss him. I really do. We had fun times. Even the last time he had, the first and only time I saw him panic. We did a show together, because I was basically like his babysitter when he was here. His wife would call me, "Where's Jack?" She knew Jack was fine whenever he was with me. And every time he came to town, I would always say, "Jen, I got you. Jack, I know he's here. I'll find where he's at, and I'll be with him most of the time if I can be." And that man's gotten into so much trouble, and here I am, still standing there with him the whole time, just bailing him out. But we like I said, back to the time I saw him panic. We did the show. I had drank some a thing of vodka that he gave me, and I was just like, you know what? When I drank the whole thing, and I wasn't thinking, I was like, fuck, I just had gastric bypass. My stomach this stuff's going to flow through me. I'm going to pass out. And at that time, we're driving. We go to the strip club, and we go in the strip club, and we're sitting there, and I'm just sitting there in a whole nother world. He's sitting there beside me. There's another guy that was sitting beside the worker that came. He was sitting on the opposite side of me. I ordered some food. I ate. Next thing you know, the food and the alcohol mixed, and I passed out on the bar, right on the stripper table. Everybody's dancing around, and he went into panic mode, and he thought I was dead. But yeah, he's like, "Yeah, we need to go home. We need to go home." I was like, I'm fine. No, we need to go home. I was like, "You sure?" He's like, yeah. You scared the shit out of me. I was like, all right.
That's a man that cares there. He wasn't worried about the strippers. He was worried about his friend.
Yeah. So, and it was funny. His last day, I physically talked to him. He said he called me up and said he was coming to Philly. And I said, okay. He's like, "You gonna be around?" I said, "Yeah, I'll be around." I said, "I'll be around." I said, "I'll pick you up from the train station." And he said, okay. And he told me the times and stuff that he was coming in. And that next day, I'm getting phone calls from everybody. Is it true? Is it true? And I'm like, what? What? And they said, Jack's dead. And I'm like, I just talked to him yesterday. I said, no. So I called Jen, and I got her voicemail, and I left her a voicemail. And I said, tell me that's not true and whatever. And then I started seeing everything popping up on Facebook or Instagram or everywhere, social media wise. And I'm like, oh, wow. I said, I just talked to him, the day before. And yeah. And I went to his funeral, or tried to go to his funeral, but everything was COVID related. Jen sent me the program and stuff, but they were only allowing a certain amount of people because Mustafa was going to come. He was going to fly in, and he wasn't able to fly in. Everything was COVID related, and the funeral was real small. So yeah, and then I basically talked to Jen, and I still talk to Jen, his wife. She posts some stuff, pictures, and talking about how she misses him, and I said, yeah. I actually still have his number and everything in my phone. But I basically was consoling her because she was dealing with a lot of backlash because Jack was one. You either loved him or you hated him, and of course he had a lot of people out there that hated him, and now everything started coming out of the woodworks when he was gone. Yeah. So I knew Jen was going to get a lot of backlash, and I just told her don't feed into that. I think she still runs some of his pages, or somebody still runs some of his pages, but I just say just don't feed into that negative, the negative stuff. Just continue on doing what you're doing.
Funny enough, and maybe Jack would have the same experience to me, but anyone that I've talked to from ECW that knew Jack only had good things to say about him.
Yeah. As I said, I only time we had a little falling out is something I disagreed with him on, and we stopped talking for a little bit because he got mad, and I let him have his space, and eventually we wound up rekindling back again, and I was there for his first retirement. I was actually in that show with him on his supposed retirement show at I think it was PWS up in Philadelphia, up in New Jersey. There was actually, you'll see video. I think I'm in the videos most of those for that show, and he retired, and I used to get phone calls every day. It was like clockwork, 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Yo, what are you doing? I'm sleeping. You do know I work. Okay, well, wake up. I need to talk. And I was like, ugh. So here I am talking on the phone 2-3 o'clock in the morning, knowing I got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work. And, he would always talk to me, call me. It was like I said, it was like clockwork. And I was like thankful when he got married because Jen took him away and I didn't get those late night phone calls. It got to the point where I had to call him to check on him to see if he was okay. He would call me during his retirement. He says, I can't. He's like, what can I do? He's like, can you get me a job? And I said, I don't think there's anything really you could do. Maybe security. I said, I think you would fit in. I said, I can get you in doing some security. I said, because, that's the only thing I can see you really doing. He said, yeah, okay. He's like, I'll do that. He's like, see what you can do. And I was like, all right. So I called around, and he calls me back like the next day and says, you know what? I don't think I want to do that. I was like, all right. I was like, okay, so what do you want to do? He says, well, what do you think about me coming out of retirement? And I'm like, what did the doctor say? What about your health? I said, you got the health issues and stuff going on. I said, well, what did they say? And he's like, well, I think I can do it. And, I was like, well, if you think you can, if you want to do it, do it. That's what you feel you want to do. And, obviously he came back out of retirement. And, it was almost like watching, from the times when we teamed up together, he was moving fluent. And then it was like a couple times we started working together again, and he started moving slower. He started working a lot slower. So I noticed, some things started to change. And it was kind of like, I almost want to say, Jack, just hang it up. It's time.
Yeah.
But I just let him do what he did. He enjoyed doing what he did, and and even to this day, he probably would still be doing it now. So yeah.
Another ECW legend that we lost last year, of course, was Terry Funk, who had a reputation for really taking the young guys under his wing and providing them with advice on the business, etc. Was that your experience with Mr. Funk too?
I met Terry I believe it was 2 times I met Terry, and we had we had some deep conversation about the business and a lot of stuff, because I was picking his brain, me still trying to. I always pick a lot of the old time legends' brains whenever I get around them, just to see and get their insight, to see what their feelings are and their thoughts, if their thoughts are the same as mine. Granted, and most of the time they are, because I grew up watching the old school wrestling, and that's what a lot of the stuff that I watched. And even still to this day, I watch a lot of the old school. I'll watch more old school wrestling than I will watch anything now. Yeah. If you ask me anything now about WWE or AEW or whatever, I'm kind of like,
Don't worry.
like, I got to go watch the shows just to kind of skim through to see who's where and what's what. And wrestling has evolved and it has changed. And I'm still stuck on the old school. When I had my wrestling school, that's the way I would train my students. The old school way. Yes, they were in a new school era, but I still wanted them to know the old school way. And to this day, some of my students, my one student, Darian Hardway, he is doing a lot of extra work for the WWE now. And he's doing a lot of traveling now on the indie circuit, so I'm kind of excited about him. I hope he does make it to where he wants to go. But yeah, but Terry, he was old school, and that's the way I liked it, and I liked the conversation with him. It was old school conversation.
Kareem, what's the craziest thing you've seen in ECW, either backstage or on a night out? Not putting you on the spot now or anything.
Because I was young at the time and never knew that it was able to happen. The whole pig being roasted in the room in the Travel Lodge. In the Travel Lodge, almost on, not on the bed. I'm surprised the curtains and none of that shit got caught on fire in there, but that was a shocker to me. And outside of the heavy drug use, because I've never touched any drugs, and I to this, I mean, I might have taken an edible here and there, but that wasn't until now in my later life. But back then, no. When I saw that, firsthand, I was like, I'm thinking this is stuff I've only seen in movies, but I'm like, wow, I'm actually seeing this in person now. People sniffing lines.
Who was the chef? Who was the chef of the pig?
The pit bulls.
Okay.
Yeah. Both. It was Gary mainly, but yeah, the pit bulls. It was in their room. But yeah.
You had the opportunity after ECW to wrestle some notable folks on the indies, including I saw a match with Tito Santana. Do you have any opponents during that post ECW era that stick out in your mind?
Tito Santana, Demolition. Me and my tag partner, we got the chance to wrestle with Demolition, and again, me being who I am, and then obviously, I'm telling my students, don't get starstruck with the guys you grew up watching on TV. And here I am starstruck with these guys I grew up watching on TV, and I'm sitting there like, wow, I'm actually in the ring with these guys I grew up watching on TV. And Demolition, would be the ones. They were I used to love them, as a kid, watching them when they came out with their mask, and they were my tag team.
And shout out to Mario Mancini of the Mario Mancini Show here on Cheap Heat, because just a few days ago, he competed with Salvatore Bellomo against Demolition for their debut on WWF TV back in 1987. So there's some trivia when it was when it was Axe and Johnny V and the former Moondog.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it's funny. I'm looking, and it's like, you know, these guys are still doing what they do, and even, you know, to this day, with a lot of the old timers that still get in the ring, Tito Santana, and you know, I'm looking at these guys, and I'm like, wow, you know, these guys love what they do, and they still are able to do what they do or what they did. You know, not so much what they did years ago, but they're still able to get in there and do what they do. Even Nikolai Volkov, before he passed, you know, when we used to he used to do a lot of shows in Jersey, and we used to hang out, and I would look at Nikolai, and I'm like, wow, Nikolai is, you know, like someone's grandfather in the ring, and he's still doing what he's doing. And you know, it makes you feel a certain way, you know, on the wrestler side of it. You know, I know a lot of fans obviously look at old timers being in the ring. It's like, you know, they need to get rid and retire and this and that. But for me, being on the wrestler side of it, I look at it as, you know, I wish I could still do what they did at the age that they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even Too Cold Scorpio, you know, I had him on several of my shows that I throw, and, you know, Scorpio, he's still able to hang with the young guys. He's flipping and flying and doing what he does.
And I suppose another one that was there, RVD, is still kind of going from the ECW era as well. Pretty strong.
Yeah, RVD is still going. Who I wish would have still kept going was Jerry Lynn. Jerry Lynn was you know, Jerry was a cool guy. He was a good guy.
I'd like to talk about your experience promoting with Keystone Championship Wrestling. You brought in, you know, a cornucopia of ECW legends, and for, you know, you touched on Too Cold, franchise was there, and Sabu. What was that experience like for you to go from wrestler to proprietor of a company?
A headache.
Yes, I concur.
It was a headache because, you know, here I am running a show now, but also still had the wrestler in me still says, hey, you know, you need to be on your own show. So trying to run a show and then also trying to mentally prepare myself for a match on the show, you know, I got two things just coming together at the same time, and then I'm getting bombarded with the attitudes and different things from a lot of the guys, and you know, a couple times I did have to pull myself off the card because I couldn't focus. I was too busy worried about what was going to happen, you know, whatever. But all in all, it's not bad. It's just more so dealing with a lot of people's ego, and that's the problem with a lot of the guys today, and still some of the guys from yesterday. Because that show, I remember that show wholeheartedly. I had a whole argument with Sabu because he didn't want to put Scorpio over, and I'm like, dude, y'all still arguing? This has been how many decades ago? How many years ago? And y'all still have heat? I said, so he said, well, if I have to go over on Scorpio, or if Scorpio goes over on me, you're going to have to pay me double.
Mm-hmm.
Why? No. And I called Scorpio. I said, you know, well, we got a little issue. And I said, you know, Sabu doesn't want to put you over. I said, if he does, you know, I got to pay him this. And he's like, man, fuck him. And I'm like, here we go. I said, all right, you know what? I'll have to change the card. So Sabu wasn't on that card, unfortunately. We replaced him with Shane Douglas, you know, last minute, and you know, they didn't have an issue. I believe when I had that card laid out, I had it with Shane Douglas, Too Cold Scorpio. Todd Gordon was there. He was the special guest referee. I know Joel Gertner was there as well, and also had New Jack. So I had me and New Jack in the middle of the card, and Scorpio and Shane Douglas to end the show. And then that's when here comes now Jack's ego. Oh, I'm way better than fucking Scorpio and this and that. Why do you got this? So here and now I got to go run back in the corner somewhere and just put my head down. I was like, okay, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I had to flip the whole card around and had to flip the whole show around. And then, Jack had a thing with, if someone was doing something that he normally does during the match, and one of my students actually did something, started bleeding all over the place, and I'm like, oh my God. And John Finnegan comes running back over here. He's like, Jack is going to have a fit and this and that, and they're doing all this stuff outside the ring. And I was like, oh. So I had to go run outside, and I'm like standing out there. I'm like, get your asses back in the ring. Like I said, it's a headache at times, but it's just, it's fun, but it's also a headache running the show.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
So what's? Go ahead.
Now I hate to put him on blast, but and I love the man to death, but the WWE star that I had on the show, he was just one of the biggest divas that and it was getting to the point where I was getting ready to unbook him only because. And I don't want to mention his name, but this guy just gave me the biggest issue when I brought him in.
Give us a clue. Give us a clue.
Worms.
Boogeyman.
But all in all, it panned out to be a good, it panned out to be a good show. It was just, yeah.
If it's any consolation, I tried to book Marty as well, so all good.
But also, who else was it? Rest his soul. Vader. Vader used to be a headache. It got to the point, and I felt bad for doing it. It got to the point where I had to block him. I had to block his phone number because he kept calling me almost every day, every hour on the hour. And, when are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? I said, I told you I would get back to you. And then I would see him in a show somewhere. Oh, what's going on with the show? Are we going to still? I will get back to you, Vader, when I'm ready. I said, this is my very first show. I'm trying not to go in debt during my very first show at the time, because he was one of the first guys I was going to bring in for my very first show. Yeah. And, he says, I don't need, a 5-star hotel, but preferably something with a jacuzzi. Well, you're getting into the 5-star hotel now. And I was like, all right. I said, okay. He was like, well, and I only fly United. And I said, okay, all right, whatever. And then he says, how about I bring my mask? I said, Vader, that's another $600 just for luggage just to bring that mask. I said, no. I said, granted, I loved it when I used to watch you come out with that mask on. I said, but these kids today is not going to know, what that mask is. I said, and he was hell-bent on wanting to bring the mask. And I said, look, I'll get back to you. I said, we're looking at already going over the number that you quoted me. And I said, I'll get back to you, when I can. And I never did bring him in for that very first show. I think the very first show I brought in Homicide. He was my first name that I brought on for that show. But yeah. But I had I'm trying to think. There's been a lot of people I brought back. I mean, I brought Scorpio back several times. Jack. It took me a while to bring Jack on. Jack hounded me. How come you never have me on the show? And I'm like, I didn't want to tell him I got more kids there. You're a little too violent for the kids. I just kept saying, I'll get you on. And yeah, I kept blowing him off. And then I finally was like, you know what, let me bring him in because he's starting to pry now. So, Demolition, Jack, Ken Anderson.
Talking to him next week.
The Hurricane, Billy Gunn, Rikishi, the Boogeyman, obviously, Sonny Ono, which is a very good friend of mine still now. Which I need to call him because I haven't heard from him in a minute. Sonny Ono and Ultimo Dragon. I had a fairly decent amount of Robbie E, Val Venus. Robbie E, funny story, he bailed on me that one show and he disappeared. He was at that time, I think he was taking a lot of people's money at that time because I kept getting the same story from a bunch of other promoters. He was taking everybody's money and no showing. And he did that to me. And then he messages me about a year and a half out of the blue. Says, "Oh, when can we work together?" And I said, "I tried a year and a half ago." I said, "As far as I'm concerned, if you do one of my shows, you're already paid." He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're already paid." And I pulled up a screenshot of my PayPal and showed him. I said, "Look, I paid you. You no-showed me on this show." And he's like, I can't believe I did that." I said, "Yes, you did." And he did it. He came back. He made good. I didn't have to pay him. He did the show. He was on that show with Val Venus. And yeah. And then after that, I haven't seen him or heard from him since. Sean Waltman, I had on a show. I had him booked for a show, and I get a phone call 2:00 in the morning. "Why do you have me in this match?" And blah, 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 blah. I mean, he just went off. I'm like, dude, it's 2:00 in the morning. I said, what the hell what's wrong? I said, I was also trying to get you more money by having you do an autograph signing at one of the gym that I go to. "Well, I didn't agree to this. I'm just going to give you your money back." I'm surprised he gave me my deposit back. But sure enough, he gave me my deposit back and took himself off the show. I said, okay. But as a promoter, that's the stuff that I go through a lot of times. And it's just like, and then even I get people bitching at me because they're not on the flyer. And I'm like, are you serious? You got all these guys on the flyer and I'm not on the flyer. I said, okay, but you're on the show. I had people literally take their own flyer, call my graphics guy, have them put their picture on the flyer.
Wow.
And then they're advertising the flyer. I said, I'm not advertising it. You can do whatever you want. I'm advertising the flyer that I already had done, and that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
It's a strange old business, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like I said, it's an interesting business, and it's also, to me, it's still a hilarious business because it's just especially now, a lot of these guys, the egos today is ridiculous, and I just look at them and I just shake my head a lot of times and just like, good luck.
Kareem, before we get into any plugs that you have or where the fans can find you on social media, I wanted to ask you this last question, and not that this is the defining moment of your career or whatever, but that injury was described by the franchise as perhaps one of the most gruesome ever. What goes through your mind? And I know you're like me and you don't watch a lot of the current product, but we hear about, especially with AEW, the number of ridiculously high risk spots that guys are doing and literally shortening their careers without the benefit of a lot of storytelling or psychology, whatever you want to call it. What are your thoughts when you hear about the extreme risks that guys are taking and not really in a lot of the cases to make a moment special or noteworthy?
It's one of them things I always tell my students, and when they come to me and say, "Hey, I want to do hardcore," and I look at them and I said, "Okay, you know the wear and tear it's going to put on you, more wear and tear that it's going to put on your body." And to me, a lot of the stuff that the guys do now, and even some of the videos that pop up on my feed or someone might send to me, and I'll look at it and I say, "Oh my God." And I'm like, they're doing this for $15, $20. Sometimes a hot dog and a handshake. And I said, you do know there's life outside of this. I said, you get injured in this ring that one time. That's pretty much it. And I don't, to me, as I tell everybody, hardcore and all that stuff died when ECW died. And I feel wrestling should go back to wrestling. You know, you don't need the hardcore. I mean, and it's funny, a lot of these people that they think they need the hardcore stuff to get over. And I've done simple stuff in my match, a simple armbar and reversal and whatever to get over in a match, as opposed to beating somebody over the head with a chair. Do I like doing that? Yeah, I do. But you don't need it all the time. Yeah, a lot of stuff. I mean, I disagree with a lot of stuff that they do. I watched the Darby Allin guy. I like Darby Allin, but you know, some of the stuff I watch him do, and I'm like, there's not going to be too much longevity in his career. And that's the one thing I always say: when you're in wrestling business, it's more so longevity. It's not what you do out there in that ring. It's longevity. You want to stay on top of what you do for a long period of time, not a short period of time. If this is something you want to do, you want to be out there for a while. You don't want an early retirement at 2 years in because you out there flipping and flying and getting spiked on your head and 50 million times a day. It's not going to work. You're not going to make it.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time tonight, sir. Where can the fans keep up with you on social media or any other projects that you have on the go?
I mean, my personal page became my. It was mainly a wrestling page, but it's became a wrestling. Obviously, now outside of that, I am also a chef. So it's became a wrestling family and friends page. So you can find me Kareem Horton on there. You'll see a picture of me in my chef outfit, or I think there's a picture of me suplexing somebody through a ladder. So you should be able to find me on there. Any Keystone Wrestling on Instagram, which it's been kind of dormant for a little bit because I was supposed to be planning a show. I'm trying to plan a show before WrestleMania gets here. But you can follow Keystone Wrestling on Instagram and or Facebook. But yeah, I got a lot of stuff going on outside of the wrestling. Me, the chef page that I have, my catering, my LLC for catering and all that stuff. You find me under Kareem Horton, and it'll come up with pretty much all my social media platforms.
Good stuff. Maurice, do you have any final thoughts, sir?
I'm just thinking, I'm thinking like I do be a busy guy, and like to be a chef and to have a catering company and to do all this stuff as well. Like you've obviously put in a lot of hours every week as well. So fair play to you, man. It was great to talk to you today, and it was nice to hear your story. Oh
yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be on here.
Well, fans, that's it for another edition of the Cheap Heat Productions Wrestling Podcast. If you haven't already, click subscribe and the notification button to ensure that you keep on top of all the tremendous content we have coming for 2024, including, depending on when you're seeing this, next week, Mr. Ken Anderson, and so much more. Until then,
Kennedy.
That's right. That's right. Until then, thanks again to Kareem. And on behalf of Maurice, take care, everybody.